The hotel wasn't supposed to be busy that night. At least, that's what Daniel kept telling himself as he pushed his cart up the silent hallway of the 9th floor. The air felt heavy there, still, unmoving, as if the floor had been sealed off from the rest of the building. He had worked as a night shift cleaner for only 3 weeks. The pay was low, but the hours were quiet, and that suited him. But the 9th floor, every employee avoided it. And tonight, unfortunately, several guests checked out unexpectedly, leaving him alone with a floor full of dirty rooms. He reached the end of the hall, the lights flickering behind him one by one. That wasn't normal. Lights don't flicker in sequence. The room he had to clean was room 918. A do not disturb sign dangled on the handle, but reception had assured him the guest checked out hours ago. Still, Daniel felt wrong about touching the door. The sign swayed slightly even though the air was completely still. He knocked anyway. The sound echoed strangely, like the door was hollow, or like there was too much space behind it. No answer. He slid the master key into the slot. The lock clicked, but the door didn't push inward. It resisted, like something was leaning against it from the inside. Daniel pushed harder. The door opened halfway. The smell hit him immediately. Not rot. Not garbage. Something warm, heavy, metallic. He stepped inside. The room was dark, except for a soft glow coming from the bathroom. The curtains were drawn. The bed was perfectly made. Nothing looked out of place. But something felt out of place. His radio crackled suddenly, making him jump. Except, no one was on the line. It was pure static, like someone trying to speak but unable to get through. He turned toward the bathroom. The light inside was dim, flickering like a dying candle. The door was halfway open. He pushed it gently. The tub was filled with water, dark water, and the surface was perfectly still, not a ripple. He leaned closer. The air around the tub felt colder than the rest of the room. And then he noticed something strange. The reflection in the water wasn't his. A man was standing behind him. Daniel spun around, nothing. The lights flickered again, brighter this time, almost like a strobe. The bathroom tiles reflected the flashes in sharp white bursts. The radio crackled again. And then, a voice finally made it through. "Don't touch the tub." It was a whisper. A whisper so close he felt it on his ear. Daniel stumbled backward, knocking over a towel rack. His heart hammered as he backed out of the bathroom. But as he stepped into the main room, he saw something impossible. The bed was unmade now. The sheets were pulled toward the center, twisted as if something had struggled there. Something that fought and didn't win. Daniel moved toward the door. And then he heard it. A breath. Long, shaky, coming from the bathroom. He froze. Slowly, a wet hand slid around the bathroom doorframe. Pale skin. Long fingers. Water dripping onto the carpet. The hand searched blindly, feeling along the wall, leaving dark streaks where it touched. Another breath. Louder. Closer. Daniel bolted. He ran for the door, but it slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. He yanked the handle. It wouldn't move. The lock spun by itself. He turned around just in time to see the bathroom door creaking open. A silhouette standing inside. Tall. Bent. Dripping black water onto the floor. Daniel grabbed his master key card and started jamming it into the reader over and over. His hands were shaking too much to aim properly. Behind him, the sound of dragging feet grew louder, wet feet sliding across carpet. The door finally unlocked. He burst into the hallway, running without looking back. His footsteps echoed like gunshots down the empty corridor. The lights above him turned off one by one behind him, swallowing the hallway in darkness. When he reached the elevator and slammed the button, He heard it, a wet footprint, right behind him. He didn't wait. He ran for the stairs. He didn't stop running until he reached the lobby, gasping, soaked in cold sweat. When he tried to report the incident, the manager's face went pale. "Room 9 wait?" She hesitated, then quietly said, "That room hasn't had a guest in 6 years. Daniel quit the same night. But sometimes when he passes by the hotel on his way home, he swears he sees someone standing in that 9th floor window. Watching, waiting, dripping." Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I checked into the hotel because it was cheap and close to where I needed to be. It was an old place, really old. The kind of hotel that had switched owners so many times nobody bothered updating anything. The carpet smelled like wet fabric. The wallpaper was peeling in long strips, and the lights in the hallway flickered enough to make your eyes hurt. But I was exhausted. I didn't care. My room was 217, a small, cramped space with a single bed and a window facing an alleyway. Nothing strange at first until I lay down for the night. That's when I heard it, a faint ticking. At first I thought it was a clock, but the room didn't have one. I sat up, listening closely. The ticking wasn't coming from one place, it moved. A tiny, sharp tick, tick, tick that slid along the walls, like something crawling inside them. I checked the vents. I pressed my ear against the wall. Nothing. Silence. But as soon as I lay back down, the ticking started again, louder this time, like it was following the shape of the room, tracing the corners, circling me. I barely slept. By morning it stopped, so I convinced myself it was just pipes cooling. Old building, old noises, nothing more. But night 2 was worse. Around 2 a.m. the ticking returned, faster, sharper, and this time it stopped right at the headboard. Directly behind me, I held my breath. Something whispered through the wall, a thin, almost childlike voice. "Are you awake yet?" My entire body froze. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe until the whisper faded into the same steady ticking. The next morning, I demanded a different room. The woman at the front desk didn't look surprised. She didn't even ask why. She just nodded and handed me a new key. Her eyes were sunken, tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. "You should have asked to switch sooner," she said quietly. "Most people do." I asked her what that meant, but she only shook her head and went back to staring at her computer. My new room was on the top floor. Bigger, cleaner, quieter, no ticking. I slept peacefully until about 3 a.m. when someone knocked on my door. Not polite knocking, not a visitor. Just 3 slow, heavy knocks. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I turned away and then froze. The door handle began to turn. Slowly, silently, like someone on the other side was trying different angles, feeling their way in the dark. I stepped back, heart pounding as the handle clicked once, twice, like it was testing the lock. Then a whisper came through the door. Different voice this time. Older, raspy.
"Why did you leave the room?"
The handle stopped turning. Silence. I backed away until my legs hit the bed. Then something slid under the door, just an inch. A shadow? A movement? No. A piece of paper. I forced myself to pick it up, hands shaking. There were words written in smudged pencil, barely legible. "The ticking follows, you can't outrun it." Just then, the sound started. Tick, tick, tick. Not in the walls anymore. From inside the room. Behind the dresser. Under the bed. Inside the closet. All at once. Like dozens of tiny nails tapping in the dark, crawling out to meet me. I grabbed my bag, ran out of the room barefoot, flew down the stairs and didn't stop until I reached the parking lot. I slept in my car until morning and left before anyone at the front desk woke up. A week later, out of morbid curiosity, I looked up the hotel online. Buried in old newspaper archives was one article from nearly 20 years ago. A maintenance worker had gone missing in that hotel. They found him weeks later, wedged behind the wall in room 217, curled into the plaster as if he had been trying to carve his way out with his fingernails. The article ended with one line. Guests reported hearing him for days before anyone believed the sounds. I haven't stayed in an old hotel since, but sometimes late at night when everything is quiet, I still hear that faint, sharp sound. Tick, 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 and I know it followed me home. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I checked into the hotel because I didn't want to go home that night. It wasn't anything dramatic, just exhaustion, a long drive, and the thought of sleeping in a warm room without responsibilities. The clerk handed me the key card to room 318 with a polite smile that felt forced. Something in her eyes flickered, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. I didn't think much of it, not then. The hallway on the third floor felt strangely quiet when I stepped out of the elevator. Not empty, quiet. Hotels have a natural noise to them. A distant TV, someone talking behind a door, footsteps. But here, it felt like the entire building was holding its breath. My room was near the end of the corridor. When I opened the door, everything looked normal. Clean, warm lighting, a queen bed with crisp sheets, a small desk, a TV I never turned on. But one thing immediately stood out: the mirror. A huge, old-fashioned wall mirror stood directly across from the bed. Not modern, not part of the hotel's interior design. It looked antique, like it belonged in a different century. The frame was carved wood, dark and cracked with age, and the glass had that faint smoky tint that old mirrors develop over time. It made the room feel wrong, like someone was already standing there watching me enter. I tried to ignore it. I showered, got into bed, and turned off the lights. The room went quiet. Too quiet. The air conditioner wasn't humming. The walls weren't settling. Nothing. And then I heard it. A soft click, like someone tapping fingernails against glass. I opened my eyes. The sound was coming from the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, rhythmic, patient. I sat up slowly, my eyes adjusting to the dim orange glow from the hallway light seeping through the crack under the door. In the mirror's reflection, I could see the bottom of the bed, the desk, part of the wall, and something else. A shadow. Long, thin, standing just to the left of the bed. My breath caught. I turned quickly to look beside me, but the space was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was still there. Perfectly still, perfectly shaped, perfectly wrong. I scrambled for the lamp and turned it on. The light flooded the room, bright, warm, normal. But the mirror didn't brighten. It stayed dim, almost like the light couldn't reach it. The shadow was gone, but the surface of the glass now looked fogged over, as if someone had breathed on it moments earlier. Right in the center, a faint handprint appeared, small, childlike, pressed against the inside of the mirror. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I went to the front desk and told the clerk I wanted a different room. Her face went pale and she nodded vigorously, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. She didn't even question why. As I handed her the key card, I asked, "What's wrong with room 318? Her eyes darted around the lobby before she finally leaned in. "That mirror isn't the hotel's," she whispered. "The last guest in that room brought it with him. He was fascinated with it." She swallowed hard. He smashed every other mirror in the room, every reflective surface, even the TV screen. That one was the only thing he didn't break. "What happened to him?" I asked. She hesitated. "He didn't check out." I waited, but she wouldn't say more. Finally, she whispered, "The cleaning staff found him sitting in front of it, perfectly still, like he'd been staring into it for hours." I felt my stomach drop. "Was he alive?" I asked. Her eyes filled with something I didn't understand. "They said his eyes were wide open," she said softly, "but the reflection wasn't looking back at them." She slid my new keycard across the counter, but something in her hand trembled. "Please, don't look into that mirror again." I grabbed my bags and left the lobby quickly. On my way out of the hotel, I passed the housekeeping cart parked near the elevators. A white sheet hung over something tall, leaning against the wall. A large rectangular shape. A mirror. As I walked by, I glanced down at the bottom edge of the sheet. I froze. Two pale fingertips were visible under the cloth, pressing outwards, as if someone beneath the sheet was holding the mirror from the inside. And the glass, though hidden, clicked faintly. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't look back. Not once. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I had lived in the hotel for almost 3 weeks, long enough that the staff no longer asked questions, and other guests stopped wondering why I was still there. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, just a temporary stay until my apartment was ready. But by the 3rd week, the place had begun to feel less like a hotel and more like a place that didn't want me to leave. My room was on the 2nd floor, above the indoor laundry room where guests could wash their clothes. The hotel itself was old, older than the neon sign outside suggested, and its hallways carried a constant smell of damp carpet and something metallic that no amount of air freshener could hide. At night, the laundry room always sounded busy, even when no one was there. Machines running, carts being rolled, doors opening and closing. But every time I checked, the room was empty. Not just empty. Wrong. Too cold, too quiet, like the air inside had been held for too long. Then one night, around 1:40 a.m., I went down to dry a shirt for the morning. As I stepped into the laundry room, a cold breeze moved past me, pushing the door open wider. The overhead light flickered, not all at once, but in a slow, delayed way, like the switch was being turned on by an old hand struggling to remember how to press it. I walked in, tossed my shirt in the dryer, and took out my phone. That's when I heard breathing. Soft at first, like someone behind one of the machines was having trouble catching their breath. Then a faint, raspy whisper, "Don't." I froze. I looked behind me, expecting someone to be standing in the doorway. Nothing, just the buzzing light. I stepped away from the machines, listening carefully. The breathing continued, but it wasn't coming from behind the machines. It was coming from under the folding table. A slow inhale, a rattling exhale, a faint scrape of fabric brushing across the floor. I bent down slowly, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear blood in my ears. And under the table was a woman, or the shape of one. She was crouched low, her face pressed against her knees, long black hair covering everything except her hands. Her skin was gray, almost damp, as if she had spent hours in water. Her nails were long and cracked, scraping slowly across the tile in tiny, involuntary movements. I stumbled back so fast I nearly knocked over a laundry cart. Her head lifted a fraction, just enough for me to see part of her face. Her eyes were wide, but not surprised, not angry, just empty, like she wasn't looking at me, but through me, past me, into something I couldn't see. Her mouth moved and her voice came out in a broken whisper, like vocal cords rubbing together without breath. "He won't let me leave." I ran. I didn't wait for the dryer. I didn't wait for the elevator. I sprinted up the stairs and locked myself in my room. For the rest of the night, I heard something. Someone moving in the hallway outside my door. Slow footsteps, stops and starts. A soft drag against the carpet. At 3:12 a.m., there was a knock. Not a hotel guest knock. Not a staff knock. A soft, deliberate tapping. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Exactly the rhythm of her nails on the tile. I didn't open the door. In the morning, I went to the front desk and asked about the laundry room. The desk clerk's smile faded immediately. She looked around to make sure her manager wasn't in earshot, then leaned toward me. "You saw her?" I didn't answer, but she lowered her voice anyway. She was a housekeeper years ago. She used to clean the laundry room at night. Security found her body in there one morning, under the table, like she was trying to crawl away from something. My throat felt tight. "What happened to her?" I asked. The clerk just shook her head. "No one knows, but guests hear things down there at night, and sometimes she shows herself to people who are alone." She swallowed. "Just don't go down there again after dark." I checked out the next morning, but on my last walk down the hallway, rolling my suitcase behind me, I passed by the door to the laundry room. It was slightly open. Just an inch. And from the darkness inside, I heard 3 soft taps on the tile. The exact rhythm she used to knock on my door. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. The hotel was old enough that the wallpaper had started curling at the corners, but not old enough to be considered charming. It sat on the edge of a tourist town that had lost its tourists decades ago, leaving behind a cluster of tired buildings and a main street that never quite decided whether it was open or closed. I was staying there for one night during a work trip. One night was all I needed, so I didn't care much about the sagging carpets or the rattling elevator. I just needed a bed and a locked door. The receptionist handed me my key card without much enthusiasm. "4th floor," she said quietly, then added, "Take the elevator on the left." I didn't think much of the way she hesitated, not until later. Upstairs, the hallway was strange. Long. Too long. The kind of long where one weak light at the end casts a glow that never seems to reach you. Every door looked the same. Beige paint. Scratched gold numbers. Peepholes that reflected the dim hallway lights like tiny glass eyes. My room 417 was halfway down. As soon as I entered, I noticed something. The air felt cold. Not just chilly, cold in waves like something in the walls kept exhaling. The heater didn't work, the windows didn't open, and the bedspread smelled faintly like old dust and something metallic. But I was tired. I tried to sleep. Around 2:40 a.m., something woke me up. A sound. Footsteps. Slow, soft footsteps in the hallway. Not like a guest walking normally. These sounded uneven, as if someone's legs didn't quite work the same way. I listened, waiting for them to fade. They didn't fade. They stopped, directly in front of my door. I held my breath. A long moment of silence passed, then a knock. 3 soft taps. I froze. Another knock. Same pattern, same distance, same slow, rhythmic tapping of knuckles that didn't sound quite right. Too dry, too stiff. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't answer. Finally, after what felt like minutes, the footsteps continued past my door. Except they made no sound going down the hall. No creaking floorboards. No fading echo. Just silence. I barely slept after that. In the morning, I went down to the front desk and casually mentioned hearing someone in the hallway at night. The receptionist's face drained of color. "Which elevator did you use?" she asked. I told her the right one. She stared at me. The right one doesn't go to the 4th floor. I thought she was joking, so after breakfast I checked. She was right. Both elevators opened on every floor except the 4th, but the right elevator's button for floor 4 didn't light up. You could press it all you wanted, but it wouldn't work. Yet last night, it took me there. Feeling uneasy, I went to explore the hallway again. This time, the hallway looked slightly different. The carpet pattern wrong somehow. Repeating too often, too symmetrical. Like the same stretch had been copied and pasted again and again. All the doors were closed except one. Its door was open by maybe 2 inches. Not enough to see inside, but enough to see darkness where light should have been. I leaned forward, listening, breathing. Not mine. Not normal. Slow, raspy breathing from inside the dark room. Then from behind the cracked door, something whispered, "Your room is next." My entire body locked up. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the carpet. The door to 418 creaked open another inch, enough for a shadowy outline to form in the gap. Shoulders too far apart, head tilted at an unnatural angle, arms hanging lower than they should. I ran. I took the stairs, not the elevator. When I reached the lobby, panting, the receptionist refused to meet my eyes. She said quietly, "You shouldn't have gone down that hall. The 4th floor was closed years ago. The people who stayed there, they didn't leave normally." I demanded an explanation, anything she could tell me. She finally whispered, "You should not have answered the door. And you should not return to your room. My suitcase, my clothes, everything I brought still in 417. I left it all behind. When I got home, I checked my phone. My lock screen had been changed. A new photo I didn't take. A blurry image of a long hotel hallway. The 4th floor. My door. And the door right next to it, 418, wide open, with something standing inside the dark room, staring directly at the camera. I've never gone back to that town. And sometimes, when my apartment gets too quiet at night, I swear I hear footsteps in the hallway outside, slow and uneven, stopping right in front of my door, just like before. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to NightFear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.